This is video number 1 for Fromm class. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Man for Himself by Erich Fromm. It'll be over the having versus being mode. Because the society we live in is devoted to acquiring property and making a profit, we rarely see any evidence of the being mode of existence, and most people see the having mode as the most natural mode of existence, even the only acceptable way of life. All of which makes it especially difficult for people to comprehend the nature of the being mode, and even to understand that having is only one possible orientation. Nevertheless, these two concepts are rooted in human experience. Neither one should be, or can be, examined in an abstract, purely cerebral way. Both are reflected in our daily life and must be dealt with concretely. The following simple examples of how having and being are demonstrated in everyday life may help readers to understand these two alternative modes of existence. After that intro, it goes on to list, or not list, but there's categories such as learning, remembering, conversing, and reading, and so on. And they're all little passages as to what the having versus being mode can conflict with, or the having versus being can conflict, and all of the ones that I just listed. But the excerpt that I'm going to be reading from is the conversing little passage, because that's what I found that I was able to relate with most. So this is the excerpt for conversing. The difference between the having and being modes can be easily observed in two examples of conversations. Let us take a typical conversation debate between two men in which A has opinion X and B has opinion Y. Each identifies with his own opinion. What matters to each is to find better, more reasonable arguments to defend his opinion. Neither expects to change his own opinion, or that his opponent's opinion will change. Each is afraid of changing his own opinion, precisely because it is one of his possessions, and hence its loss would mean an impoverishment. The situation is somewhat different in a conversation that is not meant to be a debate. Who has not experienced meeting a person distinguished by prominence or fame, or even by real qualities, or a person of whom one wants something? A good job, to be loved, to be admired. In any such circumstances, many people tend to be at least mildly anxious, and often they prepare themselves for the important meeting. They think of the topics that might interest the other. They think in advance how they might begin the conversation. Some even map out the whole conversation as far as their own part is concerned. Or they may bolster themselves up by thinking about what they have, their past successes, their charming personalities, or their intimidating personalities if the role is more effective, their social position, their connections, their appearance, and dress. In a word, they mentally balance their worth, and based on this evaluation, they display their wares in the ensuing conversation. The person who is very good at this will indeed impress many people, although the created impression is only partly due to the individual's performance, and largely due to the poverty of most people's judgment. If the performer is not so clever, however, the performance will appear wooden, contrived, boring, and will not elicit much interest. In contrast are those who approach a situation by preparing nothing in advance, not bolstering themselves up in any way. Instead, they respond spontaneously and productively. They forget about themselves, about the knowledge, the possessions they have. Their egos do not stand in their own way, and it is precisely for this reason that they can fully respond to the other person and that the person's ideas. They give birth to new ideas, because they are not holding on to anything and can thus produce and give. While the having persons rely on what they have, the being persons rely on the fact that they are alive, that something new will be born if only they have the courage to let go and to respond. They come fully alive in the conversation, because they do not stifle themselves by anxious concern with what they have. Their own aliveness is infectious, and often helps the other person to transcend his or her egocentricity. Thus, the conversation ceases to be an exchange of commodities and becomes a dialogue in which it does not matter any more who is right. The duelists begin to dance together, and they part not with triumph or sorrow, which are equally sterile, but with joy. That was the excerpt on conversing, and as I said before, this is what I could mostly relate to, just because I used to be, well, I am partially still more of the having mode as opposed to the being mode, especially in conversing. I find myself with very strong opinions, and when I am conversing with someone else about such a strong topic, I tend to bring out more of my own views and thoughts and opinions on the subject as opposed to taking in what they have to say and letting all of my ideas and thoughts kind of control the situation and not be able to fully get their side and understand where they're coming from and maybe see the situation as a whole completely different. So I feel as if you're more the being mode as opposed to the having mode in such in such a way as conversing or reading or learning or whatever the topic is, I think that being in the being mode is more efficient because you can take in more, you can learn more, you can maybe change your views and opinions on things that you never would have seen if you were stuck in the having mode and in your own built up personality or